The first year of this dynasty went as well as we could have hoped. Went 12-4, 5-1 in the division. We don't talk about the one. Lucked our way into the number 1 seed in the playoffs, beat the 8-8 Jacksonville Jaguars, took on the Raiders in an AFC Championship rematch from 1976, making the Super Bowl for the first time since 1995. Where they took on the defending Super Bowl champions, ending with a dramatic play in the 4th on 4th down, giving Bill Cowher his second Super Bowl loss in his career. It may be a disappointing end to the season, but the season should still be considered a success nonetheless. This is still a very young team with some great players on it, like it says here. What can a coach do after losing the Super Bowl but pick up the pieces and try again? This shouldn't be a challenge for the number 3 coach in the AFC. Keep in mind he, along with Callahan and Wanstead, all finished with a 12-4 record. This was also the 3rd straight 10-win season and the 4th straight winning season. He got the head coaching job in Pittsburgh in 1992 after 3 seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs as their defensive coordinator, where the defense was top 10 in each season in points allowed. Before his tenure there, he started his career in Cleveland. He was a special teams coach during his first 2 years before becoming the secondary coach in 1987, where the team was 8th in passing yards allowed, 3rd in passing touchdowns allowed, and 6th in interceptions. In 1988, the team was similarly ranked 6th in passing yards allowed, 4th in passing touchdowns allowed, but 12th in interceptions. You can see why the Chiefs took a chance on him only after 2 seasons of defensive coaching, 4 years in total, 7 years before he got the Pittsburgh job, and 11 years before he made the Super Bowl. Then it took another 8 years before we got there. This coming season will be his 20th as a coach in the NFL. He is under contract for the next 2 years. There's no reason not to keep him on the team until he's ready to leave, but if Bill Belichick can get kicked out after all he did, I guess Cowher can too. He did regress slightly on his overall defensive rating. His offensive stats did improve by a point in each position except the wide receiver, while on defense the line regressed by 2 points and the linebackers by 1. His kicker and punter rating also took a hit. I'm not sure how the game decides what to progress or regress, but overall I was expecting no regression since we did make it to the Super Bowl. The offensive coordinator is Mike Mularkey. He seems to be a very well-rounded coordinator. Last season the team did finish in the top half of the season in most categories. This seems to be his final season under contract, but I would like to bring him back pending on how well this season goes. Mike Mularkey spent most of his time here in Pittsburgh, and after the season I was expecting teams to poach him for a head coaching job. He's been the offensive coordinator for the Steelers for the past 3 years. In his first 2 years with the team, he finished in top 10 for points and top 5 for yards. Prior to becoming the coordinator, he was the Steelers tight end coach for the past 5 years, working with players like Bruner. That's it. That was the most noticeable player he worked with. Before that, he was the tight ends coach for the Buccaneers, where Jackie Harris led the team in receiving yards and had the most productive season in his career, which is impressive considering before he became the tight ends coach, he was a quality control coach. That's the equivalent of an entry-level job or an internship that does all the boring stuff or things that actual coaches don't want to worry about. His offense regressed by a point, but nothing else. I don't understand how that works, but I shouldn't be complaining. He'll be returning to the team pretty much the same when we started. That's a good thing. Tim Lewis is the defensive coordinator for the Steelers. He's under contract for the next 2 seasons. While his defensive line and linebacker ratings are good, the team did rank low in stopping the run, though the secondary did play pretty well considering the young unproven players that were starting at the safety positions in Chris Hope and Troy Polamalu. There has only been one home for Lewis, and that's Pittsburgh. He's been here his entire NFL career as a coach. Previously, he spent 2 seasons coaching college football, where he was a Pittsburgh Panther defensive backs coach before being hired to be the Steelers defensive back coach from 1995 to 1999. The team was ranked 5th, 18th, 18th, and 4th in passing yards allowed. While he was a defensive coordinator from 2000 to 2002, the team was 7th, 1st, and 7th in total yards allowed. They were also 6th, 3rd and 16th in points allowed. It looks like the team would be regressing, but the defense this season was 3rd once again. His reward is to have his defensive rating be dropped by 2 points, while also having its defensive line and linebacker ratings drop by 1 and 2 respectively. His safety rating did go up by a point. Feels like a crapshoot with the progression for coaches in this game. The final coordinator is Kevin Spencer for special teams. Josh Miller had a good season while Jeff Reed had a down year compared to his rookie season, but overall they were both good. Spencer's ratings aren't going to blow you away, 70 and 71, but he's still under contract for another season until I see the position combust. I think he's safe. He's the newest coach with the team, relatively speaking. This was his 2nd year as the special teams coordinator, spending his previous 4 years with the Colts as the special teams coordinator. Prior to that, he worked 3 years with the Raiders, working his way up from quality control to assistant linebackers coach to defensive assistant coach, but he started his career with the Browns in 1991. He was a coaching assistant his entire tenure there. Spencer was the only coach to have a significant boost to his ratings. Motivation, ethics, chemistry, knowledge all got a 2-point boost. Surprisingly, nothing else did. I would have assumed the position ratings got a boost like kicker and punter, but only those coaching traits were touched. Those will be the 4 coaches that the Steelers will be going into year 2 of this dynasty with. The plan is to run it back with the same staff. Hopefully we can keep as many starters from the previous year to run it back as well. There will be one player from the roster who will not be back in the NFL next year, Brent Alexander. The undrafted free agent who spent time in Arizona and Carolina will be ending it in Pittsburgh. He did have a big regression that led to his early retirement, had no production this past season as depth. I was expecting another year with him as the potential backup, but with Chris Hope taking over the starting free safety spot, the move now is to draft Alexander's replacement. At the beginning of last season, we acknowledged that this was a position of need. This doesn't change that fact, other than Chris Hope's progression. He's now turned into a good enough starter, but having a backup plan in case he regresses doesn't hurt. Our division rivals had some retirements, but nothing to impact their teams. Bengals quarterback Shane Matthews retired, another undrafted player who found success. But as a backup, his most memorable moment was when he threw a Hail Mary against the Browns in 2001 to tie the game. Speaking of the Browns, Brant Boyer retired. He was a 6th-round pick by the Miami Dolphins, only playing for them during his rookie season before being shipped off to the Jacksonville Jaguars during the expansion draft. Fun fact, Bill Goldberg was a part of the expansion draft, being the 3rd to last player selected for the Carolina Panthers. I think most people know Brant Boyer now more as a special teams coordinator for the Jets. He's been there for the past 8 years. While the Ravens had no retirements, watch out, looks like Baltimore will be taking over the division this year with their full roster coming back next season. I do want to briefly talk about how the Oakland Raiders were 12-4 this past season, unable to replicate the undefeated season I had with them. With their retirements this year, will they be able to have as good of a season as me? I started the year 5-4 before injuries took over and the team collapsed mid-season, losing 4 straight before finishing 7-9 and missing out of the playoffs with a season finale loss to the Denver Broncos. I'll be sure to keep an eye on them. We're now going into the re-signing period, and the plan is to bring back any starters who need a new contract and keep as many decent backups if there isn't already one there. Going by positions, I'll also be hiding the ratings just to leave it as a surprise when we go over the full roster and compare to the previous season. At quarterback, Tim Levsick, I don't know how to pronounce that name, but he needs a new contract. He's the 4th quarterback on the roster, and as you can tell, he was on the bottom of the list. There's no real reason to have him return to the team with how St. Pierre was able to win against the Jets last season and Charlie Batch being the true backup. He was only the 4th player from Robert Morris University to ever get an NFL contract, started his career in Miami before being cut and picked up by the Steelers the following year, only lasting 2 years in the NFL, then moving on to the Arena Football League for another 2 years. I think he's currently the wide receivers coach of a high school football team. Next up is Kreider. I am showing Haynes ratings because we're stuck with a difficult decision. Do we re-sign Kreider and have Haynes be the backup, or do we move on from him and go ahead with a cheaper 1-year rental before having to extend Haynes, who will most likely be paid the same amount as Kreider? Haynes is more of a check-down safety valve back with soft hands and decent speed. Kreider, on the other hand, fits the mold of what I like in a fullback, a run blocker who can pave the way for the running back. After looking at the contract offer, I really made this more dramatic than it needed to be. He was still a cheaper option than Haynes, and it allows us to keep both on the team just in case of an injury. The bus driver will be back. Oh, also, he was on the 2009 Arizona Cardinals team. Next up at wide receiver, Chris Doering is in need of a new contract. He was the 4th receiver on the depth chart this season. That means he wasn't used much at all this year, 11 receptions for less than 100 yards. It doesn't help that he had a steep regression this season by 6 points, added to the fact that he's over the age of 30. Time isn't on his side, and this will most likely be the end of his NFL career unless a team picks him up in free agency. He won't be returning, but I don't think most people remember him because of his NFL career.
Werfel dropping back to throw, pumps and fires the ball over the middle. It's Doering! It's Doering! Doering's got a touchdown! Oh man! Doering's got a touchdown!
At left tackle, we currently have nobody under contract. The starter last season was Marvel Smith, and I said the plan was to bring all the starters back. He only allowed 2 sacks the previous year, and at the age of 26, if we can lock him up for a long-term contract, we may not have to worry about this position until after our Super Bowl window closes. It's going to be expensive, but with over $20 million in the cap, it's an easy decision to keep him on the team for next 4 years. Matthias Guenti would be the backup if he's brought back. Obviously he's cheaper, but I feel like I can find someone in the draft just as good. He's not going to be back. His career also ended after the season in real life due to a back injury forcing him to retire. At left guard, we have Kadrick Vincent, who needs a new contract. He did get some playing time this year at right guard when Simmons went down, but with such little playing time, he allowed way too many sacks. I'll place blame on him playing out of position. He is our best backup, and the truth is, it's invaluable to have a guy who can play anywhere on the interior when needed. It also didn't hurt that he was so much cheaper than I thought he would be to return to the team. He'll continue to be our backup. Oh, also, he played for Arizona back in 2007. There's another backup that needs a new contract at center, Chucky Okobi. In front of him is Jeff Hardings. He's going to be the starter until he regresses. As of now, he's still a starter quality center. Question is, should I keep Okobi? I did consider re-signing him to the team, but as of right now, I'll put it on hold. We still have another backup offensive lineman who needs a new contract, Calvin Collins. I think it says a lot when I'm willing to have my left guard start over him. He's not going to return. This was the reason why I wanted to hold on in re-signing Okobi. There are still some starters like Aaron Smith who need a new contract. Plus the draft, and if there's anyone in free agency available that I might want to sign, we need to be smart with the money. It was a down season for Aaron Smith compared to his previous year, but he's still a key part to this team. The second best player on the defensive line. Over his career in the NFL, he wasn't exactly a stat guy, but he was still a solid performer. He's going to be expensive, especially in the final year of his contract, but we can release him with little cap hit after 3 seasons. We'll see if that'll be necessary. At right end, Rodney Bailey needs a new contract. He had a bit of a glow up, but Olhoffen also had a bit of a regression that has now forced my hand to bring back Bailey. It's not like Bailey had a phenomenal season, but with his new rating, there's a chance that he can be more productive this season. He doesn't become a true starter in the NFL even after going to Seattle for a season in 2005 before coming back to Pittsburgh in 2006. Oh, did I mention he played for Arizona in 2007? The original plan I had this offseason was to draft a rookie to sit behind Bailey and Olhoffen, but with how he's regressed, there may be a chance I draft a player to replace him completely. With that being said, the first half of the plan is still to re-sign Bailey. He'll be half the cost of Aaron Smith, but with much more upside going into the future. We currently only have one player under contract at defensive tackle, and that's Big Snack. I think it's pretty clear with his rating being so low that Chris Hoke isn't coming back. It's not like he'll get any use in this 3-4 defense. He hasn't had any playing time the past 3 seasons. He's not going to be back, which is very different from his 11-year career with the Steelers in real life. Now, Kendrick Clancy is a different story. I would like to have him back due to the fact that it never hurts to have good depth for a few games if injuries were to happen. The problem with that is he's regressed. How much longer will he continue to be good depth before we have to replace him? Or would it be better to draft his replacement or search for a cheaper option in free agency? He's still very young at the age of 25. Bonuses in this game aren't terrible enough to be a problem for cap penalties in the future, but I still want to wait till we go through the rest of the roster to make my decision on him. We're almost done with the re-signings, I promise, but up next is Clark Haggans at left outside linebacker. He had to come in for the second half of the season when Jason Golden was out with an injury. He wasn't outstanding, but he was serviceable at the spot. Behind him is Alonzo Jackson, and he was a 70 overall last season. We could let Haggans walk and run with Jackson as the starter, but with no right outside linebacker, I think the option here is to bring back Haggans so that Jackson can back up Porter. He is going to cost more than expected, but I'm willing to pay the price for a guy who's already had playing time in this system where he didn't do terribly. The next players up are at cornerback, Hank Poteet and Chidi Uwoma, a third-round pick who was a serviceable depth player until this coming season where regression has come at him hard. It's quite obvious at this point he's not returning. Interestingly, Poteet wasn't on the team during the 2003 season as he was cut. He was with Tampa Bay, the team that beat us in this game, but went on to New England from 05 to 6, then the Jets from 6 to 8, where he would find some success before finishing his career in Cleveland. At least it was in Arizona. As for Chidi Uwoma, he was nothing more than a very good special teamer for the Steelers during this time. For me, I'm not too concerned with that in simulation. He won't be re-signed. That most likely means his career ends here, instead of traveling to New England 2006 and finishing his real career as a tight end in 2007. If you have a chance and you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, this video goes over the career of Uwoma. The last player is Jeff Reed at kicker. I would like to bring him back. Was he phenomenal his first year in the series? No. He only wanted a 2-year deal, which isn't team friendly because I have a feeling that his rating will be much higher when it's over. It's going to cost more money, but I don't want to go looking for a new kicker this offseason who might not be as good. Knowing that I have just over $17 million in cap space, it's lower here as it projects it as if it's after the contract's been signed. I'll be bringing back Okobe. Oh, did I mention he played for Arizona? Since we have the money left over, I decided to bring back Kendrick Clancy to continue to be the backup behind Big Snack. That leaves us with just over $15 million to sign free agents and draft picks. Here are all the players that I will let go. There's only one player that I'm questioning if I should have brought back or let walk. That's Quenty. For the price that he wanted and the position that's very valuable, I might regret letting him go. We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out in the draft and free agency, which is coming up next. Now, I could go through every player I scouted, but when the draft comes up, I'll go over players that I was debating on getting on and showing you my thought process behind it, even if it is flawed. What I'm going to do here is talk about a few positions and when I want to draft them. The number one position that I want to draft is the tight end position. With Bruner having a big impact in the playoffs, you would have thought this season was just as good. He had 1 reception for 6 yards. It doesn't help that he, along with everyone else in the group, regressed hard. That makes this position our number one priority, and I want to go after a tight end in the first. Now, I did briefly look at free agency, but there wasn't really a name that I wanted besides Strahan. There also weren't any big name players to improve position of needs besides Strahan. That makes the tight end position our top priority in the draft, and there's only one projected to go in the first, and we have the 31st pick. I'll be surprised if he makes it that far. I still wanted to draft a defensive end. It was and still is a position of need. Bailey could be a solid backup if we bring in Strahan. Then we can draft a rookie to develop behind them to become decent depth in the future. I do plan on drafting one, but in the later rounds. Seeing how well Chris Hope progressed over the previous season has given me confidence that he'll be fine as a starter this year, but he's also going to be on his final year of his contract. I want to draft his potential replacement in this draft, but we also need to fill the hole that Brent Alexander left when he retired. The ideal scenario is to draft a player who can be good depth that can eventually replace Chris Hope on a cheaper contract. I also don't mind if he's just decent depth and we re-sign Chris Hope. I'm fine with either outcome. The Steelers are now on the clock. Sitting with the 31st pick in the NFL draft, there were plenty of players in positions of need. Randall Wynn being the number one choice, the tight end is the only one projected to go in the first round, and they're in desperate need of one after the regression at the position. He's also a different kind of tight end that they're used to having. He's more of a receiving threat than a blocker, has soft hands, and and he extends properly to pluck and snatch, showing that he has great hands while also being able to show some savvy in his route running. That means he'll probably be used more often in this offense as an extra receiving threat than Bruner. The decision at the moment is either Wynn or Julian Kelly at free safety. He's not as big of a need at the position like Wynn is, but there's nothing to scoff at with Kelly either. He's proven to be a great blitzer, knows how to avoid blockers when coming in hot. He's also decisive in recognizing plays and is rarely caught out of position. Julian Key sounds like the kind of player we could use in the secondary. In the end, with the 31st pick in the NFL draft, I went with the best tight end, Randall Wynn. He may not be the fastest, but he probably has the softest hands from the draft class. His run blocking isn't that bad either. I give it a few seasons, but this kid looks like a star in the makings. He is only 21 years old. Keep in mind, preseason development stops after the age of 25. There's a chance he'll be even better before the start of the year. We're now in the second round, and look who's still available. At the moment, Julian Kelly is a player that I would like to bring onto the team since I did scout him fully. I think he'll be a great backup for the season, but someone else did catch my eye. Eric McKinney had my attention for a bit, projected to go in the second and third round. His report said he had great tackling and a good interview, but the one thing that put me off was that they wrote a history of medical problems. We had this problem in our previous Madden series. Some of these draft picks were made out of glass. With our second round pick, we selected strong safety, Julian Kelly. Another player who is very slow, but something I already noticed is that it seems that the scouting notes don't match up with the ratings. Good catching for Wynn led to an 89 rating, while good for Kelly for tackling was a 71. You'll also notice as the draft goes on, these ratings continue to scale differently based on where they're projected to be drafted, which makes me think that it might be better to just draft the top players on the list, but I'll continue to scout players either way. We've now filled two of our biggest positions of need. The other would be defensive end, which there are plenty of them still available, but I got interested in another player, Lee Oleski. Good pass and run blocker, projected to be selected in the second and third. This might be a steal of a pick if selected, but we have more pressing needs than a backup left tackle. I was also deterred from his notes. Does not show great hand punch in pass protection. Instead, I focused on defensive end like Eric McKinney again. He's also projected to go between the second and third. Great tackling, good interviewer, but again, the notes said he had medical problems, which made me want to look at someone else before I decided. A player that caught my eye was DYN Avery. Amazing tackler and a good interviewer. He was projected to go later than McKinney. The second half of the draft, the notes have him as a good pass rusher, but not strong enough to move a pile nor fast enough to make an impact. One thing that stood out to me, well, two. First being, doesn't look like he'll have any injury problems. The second one being he's a year younger than McKinney. I made my decision. With our third pick in the draft, we selected defensive end DYN Avery. A 62 overall, this is either way lower or higher than expected. Keep in mind he's not going to be a starter on this team. The point of this selection was to have him develop over the next few years before he starts. He does have solid tackling and decent strength. We'll see how this transfers to the NFL, even if he is slow like his rookie teammates. We're now moving to the middle of the draft, the fourth round. I have a position that I want to draft, and that's left tackle. I talked about Lee Oleski. He's still on the board. Could be a steal of a selection in the fourth round, but I didn't like that the first note about him was negative. There was another player that piqued my interest, Matt Johnstone. Good run blocker, but great pass protection. The notes say he's not quick to locate and stalk the linebacker in the run game, but he's a tackle. Typically, I like to run in between the tackles. I don't know if the Cowher scheme does that, but it would negate the need of tackles having to swing out and make those kind of blocks. He also had a better interview than Oleski, but he's a smaller player than him. You know my motto, if he ain't thick, don't make the pick. But in this situation, he's younger, has a better chance to develop. In the fourth round, the Pittsburgh Steelers select left tackle Matt Johnstone. Like I mentioned earlier, I think it scales based on where they're projected because his pass blocking isn't much better than his run blocking. I still don't know if that's true, but his strength does make up for the lack of skill at the spot. He's going to be the backup behind Marvel Smith. It's a good situation for the kid to be in. There's not many players left that I have scouted, but we still have two players at a position that we need, right guard, since we let Calvin Collins walk. Kenny Fisk is one of two players at guard. Great run blocking, good pass blocking. Mike Keys is the other player, similar to Fisk. The only difference is he's a year younger but had a slightly worse interview. At this point, I don't think it matters who we pick. In the 5th round, we selected right guard, Mike Keys. At 55 overall, I'm not quite sure how to feel about the selection. I don't think Fisk would have been a better option at the spot, but in the end, he was a year younger, more time to develop, and he'll be sitting behind Simmons to learn the position. At this point, we had no more players that we had scouted, so I went looking around for positions that we needed to fill. Defensive tackle was one of them. Isaac Perry, good tackling, and the strongest defensive tackle available. In the 6th round, we selected him. He ended up being much better than I thought he would be, 59 overall. Still not great, but his 93 strength is pretty impressive. Hard to teach strength and speed. He is underweight for a true nose tackle. Gonna have to get him to start cultivating. In the final round, there was only one position that I could think of, and that was right outside linebacker. We technically don't have anyone behind Joey Porter. I figured Rob Scott can be his backup. They had him graded as a great tackler. In the 7th round, we selected him. He's not fantastic, but considering how slow everyone has been in the draft, we got away with him being 73 speed, though his 71 tackling is disappointing. Up next is free agency, but before we go there, I do have some roster moves I want to make in order to free up some space. I talked about how Bruner, well, everyone regressed at tight end. With the addition of Randall Wynn, they all became expendable, with Bruner taking in $2.5 million this season and the lowest cap hit out of all the players. It's clear he's not going to be on the team next season. We released him. Same situation at right end. Olhoffen has regressed, and with how much money he'll be taking in to ride the bench, it might be a better option to have the rookie Avery take his spot as the backup. We went from $13.46 million in the cap to $18.01 million to work with by releasing those two players. Let's head to free agency and see what we can do. One position of need that wasn't addressed in free agency was a 4th receiver for the team. I'll be looking for that here, and my first thought was to sign Oronde Gadsden. Obligatory Gadsden catch. He wouldn't be used too often and would provide solid hands for the team. The price for him was much higher than I thought he should be. I continued to look around and considered Who's Your Mama, solid 3rd receiver, but price wasn't too far off from what Gadsden wanted, but I think I found the player I wanted. That was Kevin Slice and Dyson. Didn't get any playing time with the Panthers the previous season. He was a part of the San Diego rebuild I did in 2K5. He was way better there. I don't know why, since his career up to that point was not good, but for the price that he was asking for here, it was a no-brainer move to bring him on as the 4th receiver. We also needed a 4th cornerback on the team. I was interested in Reggie Howard, but for the price that he was asking for and the production that I was expecting, I passed on giving him an offer. It also didn't help that he wanted an expensive long-term contract. He ended up signing with Carolina. I did find a cheaper option in Eric Kelly, a former starter in Minnesota who ended up getting phased out on the team. He would be nothing more than a depth guy, the 4th guy in the group, used only in dime and possibly special teams. There is still a lot of cap space that can be used. Michael Strahan is a guy that could turn this defensive line from okay to amazing. I do want to sign him, but I'm very stingy with my money. I feel like this defense didn't need a great defensive end to succeed this past season. Why do we need one now? I might regret it, but I'm not going after him. Looking at the rest of the positions in free agency, I noticed that Bruner is going to take a pay cut to go to Buffalo, which he did accept. I did want to bring in a 4th running back to the group. Travis Minor was a player that piqued my interest, but not for that price. He ended up signing with the Panthers. With Charlie Batch going into his final year, I did consider getting a replacement. AJ Touchy-Feely was on the radar, but I decided I'll worry about Batch next season. Interestingly, Washington signed the 3 best defensive players in free agency. They signed Strahan, Lynch, and O'Neal. They might be making a push next season. You know who didn't sign? Olhoffen. With all the positions of needs filled and the offseason over, let's move on to year 2. It's the beginning of training camp. Normally I don't do these, but I figured for this video I'll test it out, but with a catch. I can only use it to improve the rookies. First up being Rob Scott, the 7th round right outside linebacker in chase and tackle. Since I haven't played this Madden in a while, it was a bit of a learning curve when it came to controlling the player. Maybe his speed and acceleration had a lot to do with it, but the turning radius on this player was wider than I expected. Many times I would over pursue, having the wrong angle or just plain missing. In the end, I was able to get 3 consecutive tackles thanks to having enough speed to meet the running back at the edge, giving us a gold. But another twist that I have is that if I get gold, we must advance to the next difficulty. This time I tried something different. I tried to strip the ball. It didn't go well. It was also much more difficult making the tackle when going for the ball. The running back was able to break our attempts. Unfortunately, because of all the stripped attempts, I wasn't able to get anything more than bronze. Lesson learned, head up, wrap up. We did earn 2 points. Let me know how I should spend these next time. Should I go one at a time, up, down, or should I just give it to the attribute I want, like I do here, giving them all to tackling? Next up is Julian Kelly, the 2nd round pick at free safety in SWAT ball. I was expecting this to be an easy gold, but with the lack of speed and the lack of hops, it became very clear I suck. For some reason, trying to bat away the deep middle pass was the hardest thing to get Julian Kelly to do. It didn't help that Kelly didn't have the best hands either to double the points that he could earn. In the end, I barely got silver on the final pass breakup. Now I see why when I jump he could barely get 2 feet in the air. I mean, literally, I'm not quite sure his feet ever left the ground when he jumped. I picked up his jumping by both points. Next up is Mike Keys, the 5th round right guard in trench fight. I was never very good at this minigame and I didn't think I would be good with a guy with 43 speed, but I did have a fast start, then struggled against the second blocker, but then completely obliterated the final guy for bronze. I'm happy with the results and ended up getting 1 point to add to strength. The final player is Randall Wynn, the 1st round tight end in catch ball. It was a bit difficult at first to get going with Wynn due to his slow speed and acceleration, but eventually I got in a groove, easily getting gold with a few receptions left. Moving on to the next difficulty, it became much more of a challenge. He's slow. That makes going from the deepest part of the field to the closest a challenge. It makes it even more demoralizing when you're on a streak and the game decides to throw a deep ball knowing you're not going to make it. Didn't help that Wynn dropped some easy passes along the way. In the end, I managed silver, 3 points that are going to go all into catching, but it wouldn't have hurt to put it into acceleration or even jumping. Hands like stickum, but feet like cinder blocks. Before we head on to the roster, we got a media contract. Looks like we're must-watch TV, a 3-year deal worth $4.05 million. Another season where the leader in the elite class will be Alan Faneca. He did lead the team in sacks allowed last season with 11, but they still had one of the lowest amount of sacks allowed as a team. This year, Faneca has regressed. His pass blocking went down by a point along with his awareness. I'm not too worried about it. He's still the best player we have on the offensive line and he's barely 27. There's a reason I saved my cap. We're going to have to pay big for these younger players. Joey Porter will be the co-leader in the elite class with his 96 overall. He had a stellar season last year, having 10 sacks and earning a Pro Bowl bid. His tackling and awareness both increased by 1 point. He'll be the best player on defense in the strongest position group we have on the team, which is the linebackers group. Another player under the age of 30, which is going to be a common theme in the elite players. At the age of 28, Hines Ward, coming off his 3rd straight 1,000-yard season in a Pro Bowl bid. Ward is looking better than ever. His overall increased by 2 points thanks to his catching, acceleration, and awareness, all going up by 1 each. I expect an even better season out of him this year. We are still running the same scheme as we were last season, so we'll see if scheme will limit his effectiveness. It didn't last year. We now have our first player over the age of 30, Jason Gilden. With just a slight regression, tackling strength went down by 1, bringing his overall to a 93. I'm just glad that this game isn't like 2K5 where injuries can completely derail a player's career. He missed half the season last year due to a torn shoulder, missed out on playing in the Super Bowl. Hopefully this year he can finish the season healthy. We're back to players under the age of 30, Plexico Burress. It's hard for me to hate on a player who had his 3rd straight consecutive 1,000-yard receiving season and a Pro Bowl bid. He did cost us the Super Bowl. His rating did improve by 2, similar to Ward. Unlike Ward, he improved more in other areas. Catching by 1, acceleration by 2, agility by 2, awareness by 4. There could also be more that improved, but these are the most important ones. Here's hoping that he won't let that fumble destroy his confidence this coming season. Next up is the youngest player in the elite list up to this point at 26, Casey Hampton. He's a true nose tackle that wreaked havoc last season in this 3-4 defense. You don't expect defensive tackles to get to the quarterback often, but he did last year. He had a progression of 2 points to his overall, tackling increased by 3, awareness by 1, and acceleration by 1. You thought he was dominant last year, he might even be more disruptive this season. We're now at the youngest player in the elite list at 24. Kendrell Bell. I spoke last season about how I didn't think he should have been on here, but after his Pro Bowl year and his comparable season to Joey Porter, he deserves to be on here. He had a progression of 1 to his overall, tackling increased by 2, awareness by 1, agility by 1, acceleration by 1. How did his overall only increase by 1? This team has to have one of, if not the best linebacker group in the NFL. The final player in the elite class is a new one, Jeff Hardings. This was the reason why I wanted to hide their ratings in the offseason. I tried to downplay his progression, but I'm surprised how well players over the age of 30 still improve in this game. I'm glad that being over 30 isn't the end of players' careers like in some later Maddens. He was second in the AFC for best lineman, giving up only 6 sacks on the season, 57 pancakes, and beat out Faneca. He did lose to Lincoln Kennedy. We now have 2 out of 5 players on the offensive line in the elite class. At the age of 32, Tommy Maddox comes into the season improved. This man was put on the right team at the right time. He has a solid offensive line, running backs and receivers. He's been given every chance to succeed, and he's been doing that. Behind him is a different story. I'm a little batch, but it looks like his time might be running out on this team soon. He is in the final year of his contract. Don't be surprised if I end up looking for a replacement in the next offseason. I'm baffled at the regression at running back. I know during the Raiders rebuild I struggled finding a good running back. I worry the same situation may happen again. The team split the carries evenly, which basically means we need 2 starting caliber running backs. Jerome Bettis' regression doesn't shock me as he's on the back half of his career, but Zero Way does worry me. They both almost had 1,000 yards on the season and still regressed. What does it take to get better at the position? This might be something I'll have to look into improving next offseason. Should I have let Crater go? Haynes has improved over the year and is pushing for the starting job. Personally, I don't mind having 2 fullbacks on the team. One's a good lead blocker, the other's a good pass catcher. It's nice to have options, but don't be surprised if Haynes isn't back next year. We already talked about Ward and Burris. Those 2 are going to be the main targets on this offense. There's no doubt about it. If an injury happens to either of them, I'm happy with Randall L taking over for a few games. Hopefully, that doesn't happen. After that, we're in trouble, but if you're hoping for your 4th and 5th string guys to get most of the targets, you're already in trouble. I am happy with the addition of Kevin Dyson. He'll be taking over Doring's spot on the roster. We needed a decent 4th receiver. We got him. I think overall, the entire position was improved. I don't know what the heck they were putting in the Pittsburgh water that they were giving to the tight ends, but they all regressed hard, which led to me drafting Randall Wynn. I think he'll be a solid addition to the team if he can improve going into the next year. Nobody will be talking about the Pittsburgh water. He is a solid blocker but a better catcher. On paper, this position regressed, but if we're strictly speaking about starters, it was a lateral move with future upside. At left tackle, the marvelous Mr. Smith will continue to anchor down the blind side. He only allowed 2 sacks last season. Behind him is Matt Johnstone, much worse in terms of overall versus Quenty. I don't know if I regret letting him go, but I do know that I'm less confident if we have to start Johnstone in a few games. Let's hope we don't have to start him. We already talked about Alan Faneca. The left side of the line is solid and performed well enough last season. I expect better this year. Who I want to talk about is Kadrick Vincent. He did improve by 2 points. I brought him back knowing that if an injury happened again on the interior, I could rely on him. He's been a career backup to this point, but he's been crucial when we needed him. We also talked about Jeff Hardings, who will be the starting center this year. Behind him is Akobe. He also saw an increase in his overall by 3 points. Is it anywhere near starting caliber? No, but I resigned him with the idea that I didn't have to draft a rookie to replace him. We all saw how well that worked with Johnstone. I'm fine with him starting a week, but I wouldn't want anything more. This is where things get interesting. Last season, the right side of the line was the weakest part, but there was a big glow up by Kendall Simmons. Suddenly, the weakest part of the offensive line doesn't look as bad as it did a year ago. But if he were to get injured, we don't have Collins anymore, and with the rookie, Keys, behind him, we better hope that Vincent has learned enough to give a better performance at the spot. I'm not letting the rookie start this year unless I have to. Another big glow up this time at right tackle, Todd Fordham. Last season, this was a big position of need. This season, it still is a position of need, but there isn't as much urgency to fix it. If there's a big time player available in free agency, then the possibility of replacing him is there, but we could have gone after Strahan this past offseason to upgrade the defensive end spot, and we passed. The question is, do we value the right tackle position enough to make a move? We also had our first regression, which was Ross. He's still better than any of the other rookies on the line. It's not a big deal. If you haven't noticed already, I've retained every starter from last year. We made the Super Bowl after all, why change anything? With that being said, Aaron Smith was one of the guys who we had to pay a good amount of money to return, but behind him is Brett Kiesel. Who would have thought that this man would have turned into the Beard? He did have a slight glow up. I'm not confident enough to put him in as a full-time starter, but if we must rely on the Beard will not fail us. This will probably be the biggest shakeup on the defense, but mainly due to the fact that Bailey improved much more than I expected, similar to Fordham, and it made finding a replacement less of a necessity. We drafted Avery, who was also better than expected. I am happy with the outcome. We didn't need Olhoffen at his price point. Again, I don't know how much defensive ends are valued on this team if we made the Super Bowl with them the year prior. At defensive tackle, we already talked about Big Snack. He's the clear starter. Once again, we'll have Clancy backing him up this season. He did have a regression, but I'm fine with it as long as he can be serviceable in games that he appears in. Hopefully, he doesn't get too much action like last year, but that might be why he regressed. Our third option at defensive tackle is the rookie, Perry. He's already better than Hoke was before we let him walk. I'm hoping that he can improve enough to take over the backup position from Clancy in the future. At left outside linebacker, Jason Gilden is the starter. There is no arguing that. Behind him is Higgins, who had playing time when filling in for an injured Gilden, and he did really well in my opinion. He deserved the new contract we gave him in the offseason. Keep in mind, I don't want him to be a full-time starter, at least not yet. Alonzo Jackson has also come a long way since the start of last season. He's even pushing Higgins for the backup job, but he already has the backup spot behind Porter. I'm very pleased with the depth at the linebacker position. For the interior in this 3-4 defense, Kendrell Bell will be one of them, the other being the ultimate farrier. He's much older than I originally thought he would be at 29, though we do have his replacement in Larry Foote if we decide to move on from farrier. He did have a big increase with a 5-point boost to his overall compared to the last season, plus he still is under the age of 25. Preseason boosts may get him closer to farrier's overall before the regular season begins. Behind those two is Krewalt. I'm not sure how he made it this far. We've already talked about Joey Porter at right outside linebacker, but this season we will have a true backup in the position with Rob Scott. I don't plan on him ever starting this season, even in case of injuries. He'll be the emergency backup behind Alonzo Jackson, but hopefully down the road he can develop enough to be better depth. This will be an interesting season at cornerback. I've talked about how we needed a plan to replace Washington, but it looks like age is but a number in this game, still improving even at the age of 31. That gives me confidence in Scott being our starter for a few more good years. While Townsend will be the nickel corner, I was hoping he was going to improve by more than 2 points, but with Washington and Scott still being in the 80s, I'm fine with this outcome. Behind him, I tried to improve the dime spot with Eric Kelly. It is an improvement, improvement, but not by much. That'll push Taylor down to the 5th cornerback on the team. On paper, this position did improve, but it wasn't really in need of a major overhaul. One of the most improved players on the team, Chris Hope, I'm sure we could have used that 2nd round pick on an offensive lineman or defensive end, but I'm still happy with the selection of Julian Kelly. He's going to be the backup to Chris Hope this season, who will be on the final year of his contract. If things don't work out, the chances are that we move on from him and continue with Kelly in year 3. No matter what happens, I think the position will still be better than how it looked in year 1 of this dynasty. We've managed to bring back every starter from the previous year to run it back. Strong safety is no different, with Polamalu getting into the 80s, 83 to be precise. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get into the 90s by year 4 or 5. Behind him is Mike Logan to be the backup. He's improved from his previous season. The depth and starters have gotten better mostly everywhere on this team. I'm very excited to see how much of an improvement we'll see this year. Let's not forget about the kicker. Jeff Reed comes into this season with a 5-point increase. He only signed a 2-year deal in the offseason. Either he does really well these next 2 seasons and we have to really pay him, or he somehow has a meltdown and does poorly that lets us move on from him. Remember Janikowski in the Raiders rebuild? He got hurt, then was terrible. You never know how kickers will perform regardless of their ratings. Lastly, the punter. Josh Miller improved by 2 points at the age of 34. I don't really know what to tell you, as I don't value punters that much in simulation, but you can never go wrong by having a good one, and he's a good one. We're inching closer to the regular season. Looks like we're all happy with how the offseason went. The scheme will also be similar to last year. As long as Cowher is the coach, the scheme will remain unchanged. I did briefly want to show that the preseason is over. There were no injuries to report, but there were improvements to talk about. Kendall Simmons had a 1-point improvement to his overall. Troy Polamalu is now an 85 overall. He might get into the 90s by next year if he keeps improving like this. Alonzo Jackson is now a 75. I think he's been one of the more shocking improvements on the team. The rookie Julian Kelly had a 1-point improvement. Larry Foote had a 2-point improvement. I do plan on him taking over Ferrier's spot eventually, but he still has a way to go before we get there. The rookie Dwayne Avery had a 2-point increase. I expect him to be a solid backup. Another rookie, Matt Johnstone, had a 1-point improvement. Lastly, Mike Keys, the last rookie and player with an improvement. Once again, every player with an improvement was 25 years of age or younger. It seems to be a benefit to draft younger players to get the max potential out of them during the season. The season will begin against the Buffalo Bills, a revenge game for Bruner, but before we get deeper into that, I wanted to show the improvement from last year to this year. The Steelers have improved in every category. The expectation is to return to the Super Bowl, right? Going back to Buffalo, this looks like it'll be a future playoff matchup. Both evenly matched offenses and similarly ranked defenses. This is how you open the season in the NFL. We start the season opener with a 36-yard field goal by Jeff Reed to get the first lead and points of the year. That would be the only points in the first quarter. And then at the start of the second quarter, a 10-play, 61-yard drive that ends with a 6-yard touchdown run by Zeroaway gives them a 10-0 lead. But Buffalo would answer back with their next drive, 8 plays, 80 yards, capped off with a 28-yard pass from Bledsoe to Henry, making it a 3-point game. But with 14 seconds left in the half, the Bills would tie it with a 36-yard kick from Lindell. In the third quarter, the Bills would score again, 17 unanswered points thanks to another touchdown from Bledsoe, this time 20 yards to Moulds on a 14-play drive. Moving over to the final quarter, in exactly the same type of game we expected today, the Pittsburgh Steelers would march down the field on an 8-play drive to tie the game at 17 thanks to Hines Ward's 27-yard touchdown reception. That would send the game to overtime, where the Bills would score a touchdown to win the game, outscoring the Steelers 23-7 after being down by 10. It was a disappointment to see the Steelers fall apart the way that they did, but keep in mind that this is a very good Bills team. The game could have gone either way. Home field advantage might have given them the slight edge. Tommy Maddox definitely didn't have the type of game I was expecting out of him. We saw this last season where he would have these very off games, but when he's hot, he's fantastic. The secondary did okay, 2 interceptions, but they did let Drew Bledsoe throw all over him. Almost 70% completion percentage isn't something to gloat about. I was afraid with the regression to both Zeroaway and Bettis that the running game wouldn't be as effective, but they both did really well today, which makes me wonder why didn't they run more? They do run a balanced offense, 33 pass attempts, 31 rush attempts, not taking into account sacks. The lackluster performance in the passing game is worrisome. Hines Ward did perform well, but the second leading receiver was Zeroaway. That's not good, especially when you have Burris and Randall L on this offense. Even Randall Wynn is another good option. You can't expect to win too many games when you're not putting it in your playmakers' hands. On defense, Kendrell Bell led the team in tackles, picking up where he left off last season. Joey Porter also had a sack in the game, the only defender with one, while the 2 interceptions were by Dwayne Washington, Old Man Can Still Play, and Mike Logan, who's the backup for Polamalu. Our undefeated season ended at week 1, but our 15-win season might end at week 2 against another good team in the Philadelphia Eagles. The Steelers' only strength on offense is the Eagles' biggest strength on defense, and considering how poorly they played last week, I don't have a good feeling about this. Once again, we opened the game with a Jeff Reed kick, 30 yards to get the only points in the first quarter. In the second quarter, the Eagles would tie the game up at 3 thanks to a 49-yard field goal by David Akers. Then the floodgates opened. The Eagles would score the first touchdown in the game with a 37-yard pass from McNabb to Thrash. Then with 35 seconds left in the half, McNabb would throw another touchdown pass, this time to McMullen, to extend their lead 17-3. In the third quarter, the Steelers would cut down the lead thanks to a 13-play, 73-yard drive that ends with a 29-yard field goal. But that would be negated thanks to the Eagles marching 80 yards on 15 plays to add 3 points with a 20-yard field goal from David Akers. Later in the fourth, the Steelers would cut the lead down to a touchdown thanks to a 69-yard punt return for a touchdown. Nice. All Pittsburgh needs to do is score another touchdown with half a quarter to go, and they do it in half the time thanks to an 83-yard interception return for a touchdown by Polamalu to tie the game up at 20, which would force a second straight overtime. Last week, the Steelers lost in overtime. This week, Jeff Reed nails his third field goal in the game to give them their first win of the season. Despite not having any offensive touchdowns, the Steelers managed to sneak away with their first win of the season thanks to their special teams and defense. This was another bad performance from Maddox. Not as terrible in efficiency, but the turnover does make what would have been a mid-performance bad. While the defense once again forced a multiple interception game, this time 3 interceptions, but they did give up over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns again. This is where I start to wonder if the regression is beginning to take effect on Bettis. Rough performance by him with just over 2 yards per carry average, Zeroaway doing the best he can to stay near that 4-yard average. Overall, the offense during these first 2 weeks have looked terrible, but a win is a win. The receiving group did get more action. Plexico Burris leading the group this week. Alongside him is Hines Ward. Even Randall L had a good amount of receptions. They just couldn't get into the end zone. Maybe this continues to improve going into next week. I do want to point out Jeff Reed made all 3 of his field goals, but they were all 30 yards or less. We're struggling in the red zone. Also, we survived thanks to Akers missing 2 kicks today. Could easily be 0-2 right now. On defense, Joey Porter led the team in tackles with 12. He also had a sack. Second straight game with 1. Jason Gilden had a sack and Rodney Bailey also had a sack. Kendrell Bell had an interception. Troy Polamalu had his interception returned for a touchdown. The final interception was from Chad Scott. The pass defense has had 5 interceptions in the first 2 weeks of the year. After that rough start to the season against 2 potential playoff teams, maybe even Super Bowl contenders, we take on the Cincinnati Bengals. This should be a win with the home field advantage on their side, but you never know. Cleveland beat them last year. Anything can happen. didn't have much of a challenge against the Bengals this week. They did struggle against them last year, but only when Carson Palmer was in the game. This was a game that the Steelers needed to have after those two close matchups to start the year. It wasn't a 300-yard performance and 5 touchdowns, but it was the best performance from Maddox this season. It's still early in the year. He could build off this while you see the difference between Palmer and Kitna. Has Palmer finished a game against us yet? We have our first 100-yard rusher this season, the first time since week 5 of last year when Jerome Bettis ran for over 140 yards. The first 100-yard performance by Zero Way since the season opener of last year. I think we're going to have to take into consideration that this will be Bettis' last season based on how he's been playing. We also had a 100-yard receiver for the first time this year with Hines Ward. He also had a receiving touchdown. Plexico Burress also had a touchdown, but I've been disappointed with his average so far this year. He hasn't been much of an impact. Kevin Dyson with a surprise touchdown. On defense, we had a lot of 4-tackle performances. We also had quite a few sacks. Porter had a sack and an interception. Polamalu, Hampton, and Smith all had a sack, while Jason Gilden had 2 interceptions in the game. We're now at 8 interceptions on the season in 3 games. There was an injury to Rodney Bailey, nothing serious, a broken toe. Well, it sounds serious for a guy who's primarily using his toes to plant, but he'll most likely be out for a week, which means the rookie Dwayne Avery may get his first start next week, which will be against the number 2 defense, the Dallas Cowboys. On paper, it looks like we should win this, but I feel like the Cowboys match up pretty well against the Steelers, defensively speaking. This could be a low-scoring, grind-the-clock-out game. It was close for the first quarter, but then the Steelers just kept scoring and scoring and scoring against one of the best defenses in the NFL. I'm surprised they managed to put up over 40 points. I mentioned earlier that when Maddox is on, he's on. Today was a good example of that. He has very high highs, threw for over 400 yards and had 4 touchdowns on the day. And this was also the 4th straight game that the defense had an interception. The running game has hit a new low once again. Jerome led the team in rushing yards. That says something when he's leading. They didn't need to run as much today considering how well they were passing, but Zero Way had his worst performance of the season after having one of the best games last week. Hines Ward had the best game of the series, 261 yards on 11 receptions and 3 touchdowns. I said I was expecting a better season from him, and he's definitely meeting those expectations. Antoine Randall L. had the other touchdown along with 4 receptions for 75 yards, while Plexico Burress had 4 receptions for 66 yards. No touchdowns, but overall the receiving unit had their best game of the year. On defense, Joey Porter led the team with 10 tackles. He also had 2 sacks. Jason Gilden also had 2 sacks in the game. Troy Polamalu had the lone interception. He's been having a solid start to the year, while Dwayne Washington had a forced fumble. Been quiet since his 2 interception performance to start the year. Lastly, Clark Higgins had a sack. We have another injury. Last week Rodney Bailey was hurt, but it didn't force him to miss the game against Dallas. This week it'll be Aaron Smith, which means Brett Kiesel will be the starter this coming week. There may be no need to have him play against the Browns, but at this point, ever since our 1 loss in the division to them last year, I'm always cautious with my expectations against weaker teams. I like lowering those expectations because it makes seeing scores like these more shocking. I was expecting it to be closer, but they destroyed the Browns. Tommy Maddox did not finish the game, but he did have a good performance. He had 2 touchdowns, but the amount of yards combined is disappointing. He will be back next week healthy. I wonder if he was pulled in the blowout. Charlie Batch, well, he turned into a bad batch. Jerome Bettis had one of the best games in his career, over 100 yards on the ground with 4 touchdowns. He still has something left in the tank. Zero Way wasn't too bad either. I guess he let the bus continue to run while he was hot. Another good game by Hines Ward. He's really taking over the position as the main number 1 on the team. Last year it was split between him and Burress, but so far Plexico has been having a weaker season. He did get a touchdown today. Also, another Kevin Steven Dyson touchdown. He's got 2 before Randall Wynn has even gotten his first career touchdown. On defense, Jason Gilden led the team in tackles. Both Kendrell Bell and Casey Hampton had a sack and a forced fumble. Joey Porter had an interception. DYN-CHISE with his first interception since the season opener. Polamalu with a forced fumble. And lastly, Rodney Bailey has already had a more productive season. He adds to it with a sack and a forced fumble in this game. This explains why Zero Way let Bettis take over the game. He's on the injury report with a PCL strain. I expect he'll only be out for this coming week, which will be against Washington. The second time we faced the number 2 defense this season. They beat Dallas easily, but I'm not so confident against Washington as they signed 3 key defensive players in the offseason with Strahan, Lynch, and O'Neal. We start the game off with a field goal, 46 yards from Jeff Reed to get the first points in the game. Washington does answer back with a long 10-play drive, 90 yards to get their first lead thanks to a 1-yard touchdown pass from Ramsey to Gardner. Quarter isn't over yet. Pittsburgh would strike back with their own long drive ending with a 4-yard touchdown run to go back up by 3. Then they would extend it to 6 with another Jeff Reed 46-yard kick. To start off the second quarter, Ramsey would find Jacobs for a 14-yard pass to go up by 1, but would add another touchdown with a pass to Coles to make it 21-13. The half still isn't over as Deshae Townsend, who's been quiet all season, makes it a 1-point game again with a 66-yard interception return for a touchdown. There would be no points in the third, but in the fourth, Washington would extend their lead to 4 with a 50-yard kick by Hall and make it 24-20 with half a quarter remaining. All the Steelers need to do is score a touchdown to win the game, and they can't even get a field goal to cut the lead. They'll lose their second game on the year against the team that I figured would be a challenge. It seems like bad Maddox has come out to play. After not being able to finish last week's game, it seems like the injury may have been lingering, at least in my mind. Barely managing above 40% completion and an interception, the secondary has been mixed. They forced 3 interceptions, but at the same time, they let Ramsey throw for over 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. The ground game managed to muster 99 yards, but both Zero Way and Bettis underperformed. Zero Way with the better performance, 16 attempts for 57 yards and a touchdown. I think we're seeing the difference between an 83 overall and an 82 overall. Once again, Hines Ward led the team in receptions and yards, 4 for 83. Plexico Burris is right behind them with 3 for 50, but nobody else really did anything. Randall Wynn still waiting for his first career touchdown. In shocking news, Jeff Reed missed his first kick of the season in this game. Makes you wonder, had he made it, would we have a chance to win 26-24 instead of forcing ourselves to score a touchdown at the end? On defense, Jason Gilden had a fantastic game, led with 8 tackles, had a sack and an interception. Polamalu had a sack. Rodney Bailey had 2 sacks. He's looking much better compared to last year. Deshae Townsend had that pick 6 in the game. Lastly, DYN-CHISE had a forced fumble and an interception. The defense has been great up to this point. It's very disappointing that the offense hasn't been able to keep up. It looks like Zero Way will still be on the injury report, but as you saw this past week, he was still able to play. The new person on here is Chad Scott. He'll be probable with a dislocated wrist. It's a good thing we have a bye week. We will have everyone healthy for this upcoming game, which will be our rematch against the Cincinnati Bengals. The first matchup was a blowout with the Steelers winning by 24. Will the home field advantage for the Bengals make this a closer game? Yes and no. Yes, it was closer, but not by much. They managed to score more points, but not a single touchdown on the day. It's the second season the Steelers have swept the Bengals. For the first time since we started, Carson Palmer has finished a game. It wasn't a terrible performance by him. Same can be said about Maddox. He had been struggling since the Browns game, but this week he had a decent performance. Hopefully he can keep it up going into next week. Jerome Bettis took the majority of the carries and had the lone rushing touchdown. Zero Way had another weak performance, but he is returning from a PCL injury. I'll give him a pass. I am getting concerned about Jerome Bettis. It's clear that he's not the same guy as last year. Interestingly enough, this might be the first time this season that Maddox was spreading the ball out evenly. Though Randall Wynn became his favorite target, see how much of a difference he makes compared to Bruner? He had 1 catch for 6 yards all of last year. Wynn almost did 10 times that here today. Burris with the lone touchdown. You know it was a long day for the offense when Big Snack Casey Hampton led the defense in tackles with 9. Joey Porter also had his first 3-sack performance on the year with a forced fumble. Jason Gilden with a forced fumble and an interception. And lastly, Aaron Smith with 2 sacks. This defense is too sweet. Last season, we had that infamous St. Pierre game where we somehow won thanks to Pennington's 6 interceptions. I don't think we'll get that lucky, but this should be a blowout considering how poorly they performed against us last year. Well, that didn't go how I expected it to go. For the first time this season, the defense wasn't able to get an interception against the team that we had 6 last season. We had none. I guess that explains why we only had 3 points. Tommy Bad Docs has reared his head again today. We need consistency out of our quarterback, and I think looking for his replacement might come sooner rather than later. The lack of a running game, considering how poor Maddox was, is baffling. The difference between an 83 versus an 82 is very jarring. It makes me wonder if ratings also control the consistency of how good a player will play, such as Zero Way seems to be much more consistent with what he puts out per week, but he, along with Bettis, will still have a random game where they go off. I know that Rich Gannon never had very cold streaks like Maddox had this year. Makes me think that breaking into the 90s might mean better consistency. It would make some sense. We had 2 100-yard receivers and none of them were Plexico Burris. He's really fallen off a cliff since that fumble in the Super Bowl. I also wonder if he's getting injured for most of the game and Randall L has to come in. It would make some sense as well if that's the case. I've noticed more playing time for him and Dyson. Even the 5th receiver Mays will get some plays here and there. On defense, Joey Porter led the team in tackles with 8. Jason Gilden had a forced fumble. That was it. The defense was completely absent in forcing turnovers today. They still managed to hold them to under 20 points, but without helping the offense in field position, Maddox couldn't get it done to score points on a full field. Things have gone from bad to worse. With the loss of Troy Polamalu for the season, this one hurts a lot. His broken shoulder will keep him out for the rest of the season, including the playoffs if we make it there. His replacement will not be Mike Logan. Instead, I'm opting to start the rookie Julian Kelly at strong safety. Looks like it wasn't a waste of a pick after all. Aaron Smith will also be out for the next 2 weeks. The Beard will be back in the starting lineup, where they'll be taking on a potential playoff team in the New England Patriots, 5-3 versus 6-2. They have the home field advantage, but I think we have the better team. Who comes out on top this week? It'll be the Pittsburgh Steelers. A 20-10 victory shows how dominant the Steelers defense can be against some of the top teams in the AFC. Tom Brady, more like Tommy Braddock's, because the defense made him look like Tommy Maddox out there. That's either a compliment to Maddox or an insult to Brady. I think it's both. Another mediocre game from Maddox to add to the very mid-season he's been having. The running game has been about what you'd expect. The offense in general has been having a down season. Besides the rare game from Bettis or Zero Way, there hasn't been a consistently good performance over a string of weeks from our running backs. For the first time in a while, Plexico Burris has led the team in receiving yards, 5 receptions for 64 yards, Hines Ward behind him with 4 for 47, Lee Mays, the 5th receiver, was the 3rd guy on here. That's a problem. We're not going to score a lot when your 5th receiver is 3rd in receptions. On defense, Clark Hagan's led the team in tackles with 10. He also had a sack. Don't worry, Jason Gilden may have been injured, but he'll be fully ready to go next week. Joey Porter had a forced fumble. Casey Hampton had a sack. Lastly, Dwayne Washington with another forced fumble and an interception. He may be old, but he's definitely our best playmaker in the secondary. We didn't come out of this game unscathed. Alan Faneca will be out for this week. It's a good thing we re-signed Vincent in the offseason. We'll also be potentially without Todd Fordham. Do you remember the Raiders series where Umbrella destroyed half the team mid-season? We'll see if we can survive this week with 2/5 of the line gone. Last year we had to send in St. Pierre because one person, Simmons, was out for a few games. That caused our starting and backup quarterback to get injured. At least they'll be taking on the Ravens, who don't look like they're going to be much of a challenge against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yet, here we are, both at 6-3 on the year. Winner of this game gets the lead in the division. I said the Ravens were gonna be dangerous with their full roster coming back in the offseason. I was joking around about that. We start this matchup with not one Matt Stover field goal, but 2 in the first quarter. Both were over 40 yards to get them a 6-point lead at the end of the first quarter. Something we've seen this season were long drives from the Steelers, this one being a 14-play, 86-yard drive finished with a 7-yard run by the bus, Jerome Bettis. Then in the final 2 minutes of the half, a big play, 74-yard interception return by McAllister for the Ravens put them back up 13-7. The Steelers would open the second half with a shorter drive, 8-play, 63-yard drive, capped off by a 2-yard touchdown pass to Burris to give them a 1-point lead. Later in the quarter, Pittsburgh would score again, a 4-yard touchdown pass to Randall Wynn, giving him his first career touchdown to give them a 21-13 lead going into the fourth. Just like the first quarter, Stover makes not one but 2 field goals, both over 40 yards again to make it 21-19. Then Kyle Bowler would find Taylor for a 3-yard touchdown pass to give them their first lead since the start of the half, 26-21. With half a quarter remaining to win the game, can the Steelers do what they couldn't against Washington? Maddox finds Rendell L for a 50-yard touchdown pass with a 2-point conversion to make it 29-26, and the Ravens couldn't answer back. Home field advantage is real, or it feels real. I don't know if there's an impact, but it would explain some of the wild finishes. That win would give the Steelers the lead in the division. Tommy Maddox gave the team that amazing go-ahead touchdown, but he also had 3 interceptions. It wasn't a terrible performance by him, but with how well last season went, you know he could do better. I've been talking about how there's been a clear difference between an 83 overall Zeroaway and an 82 overall Bettis. But can we talk about the drop that they both had compared to their original 84 overall rating? I'm not even sure either of these two will come close to 1,000 yards like last year. Get the ball to your playmakers, and your playmakers will get it done. Today, they got it done. Plexico Burris with over 100 on the day and a touchdown. Hines Ward with 5 receptions for 55 yards. Randall L with 64 yards on the day, 50 of those coming from the go-ahead touchdown. Randall Wynn finally got his first touchdown. Has as many touchdowns as Bruner had catches for the team last season. On defense, Kendrell Bell led the team in 7 tackles. Rodney Bailey is paying us back for putting trust in him as the starter. He had 2 sacks and a forced fumble. Clark Hagens with an interception. Lastly, Chad Scott with an interception. In more bad news for this elite defense, James Ferrier is now out for the season with a broken elbow. That means Larry Foote is going to come in sooner than expected to be our second interior linebacker. The drop-off without Ferrier shouldn't be too impactful, especially against the New York Giants, but then again we lost to the Jets. We start the second quarter with not one but 2 Jeff Reed field goals to take a 6-0 lead. The Giants would answer back with a kick of their own to make it 6-3. Then in the third, they would tie it up at 6 with a 32-yard kick from Hollins. As you can tell, this game was as boring as a game can be going into the fourth, but then a 29-yard interception return for a touchdown for the Giants gave them the lead for the first time today. The Steelers would answer back with a 12-play, 62-yard drive that ended with another field goal, this time 26 yards to cut the lead, 13-9, but that was it. And there's something about New York teams that gives Pittsburgh the strangest games for the second time this season, and it happened to be against another New York team. The Steelers didn't force an interception. Tommy Maddox didn't have a terrible performance other than that pick 6, but overall it was as mid as it can get. The running game had a resurgence this week with Zeroaway getting over 90 on the ground, but the one negative being that he fumbled the ball. Bettis was keeping up his 3-yard per carry average. Interestingly enough, the ball was spread out evenly in the passing game. Hines Ward led with 5 receptions, but Burris led with receiving yards at 60. The offense has been the biggest head scratcher To make things even more demoralizing, the Giants kicker had every chance to extend their lead but kept the Steelers in it and they still couldn't capitalize on it. On defense, Kendrell Bell led the team in tackles with 8, Rodney Bailey continues his impressive season with a sack, Aaron Smith had 2 sacks, while Alonzo Jackson is making plays when he can with a sack and a forced fumble. That loss hurts us from extending our lead in the division, but there's still 5 games to go. Anything can happen. As of now, we're still in the lead, but by a game. We can extend it to 2 games with our rematch against the Ravens this week. We snuck by them 2 weeks ago, but we had the home field advantage. The Ravens have fallen into a slump, losing their previous 2 games. How will this one end? Not like the first one, wasn't as close as the Steelers will sweep Baltimore once again with a 26-25 win this week. It's a special kind of season Maddox is having to throw over 40 times in a game and still have under 200 yards. I'm hoping this isn't him regressing to the mean. Zeroaway had his 2nd straight game with a fumble. With a sub-3 average, Bettis had a better game with less carries, a fumble by Maddox as well. The offense is not good, which is odd with all these playmakers on the team. Keep in mind this was the number 3 defense in the NFL. That could be why they struggled, but when Mays is almost your leading receiver, there's an issue on this offense somewhere. On defense, Kendrell Bell led the team in tackles. He hasn't done much this season other than being a tackling machine. Joey Porter had a sack and an interception. Clark Hagan's had a sack. He's been getting more playing time. DYN-Washington had an interception. Lastly, Deshae Townsend had an interception that was brought back for a touchdown. That win will now give the Steelers a 2-game lead going into the final 4 games of the season. A win next week or a loss by either the Ravens or Bengals will give them the division once again. The Pittsburgh Steelers can win the division this week with a win against the Browns. On paper, it should be an easy matchup, but we all saw last season division games can go either way. The Pittsburgh Steelers did what they couldn't last season. They swept the entire division with that win over the Browns this week, the only team that's beaten them in this series. I think we've come to terms with the fact that this is what the peak of Tommy Maddox looks like right now. He'll give us a great game once in a while, but this is what the average game will look like. We'll have to replace him soon. The running game has been consistently this. I don't know if their regression is the reason to why their output is so low this season. Is it also the reason why the offense has been lackluster? I think our biggest priority is to find a running back who's consistent. Both Burris and Ward had over 70 yards in the air, been harder for the receivers to get into the end zone, but Ward has been productive. Despite the lack of production from Maddox, Randall L. didn't get much action as a receiver, but he did get another punt return for a touchdown in this game. He's been a great return man. The defense has been the thing keeping the Steelers on top of the division. Kendrell Bell and DYN-Washington both led the team in tackles with 9. They both had an interception, Bell with a sack, Porter with that trifecta, a sack, forced fumble, and an interception. Aaron Smith with a sack. Lastly, Larry Foote, who's been the replacement for Ferrier, had a sack. With that win, the Steelers technically won the AFC North once again, even if it doesn't show here thanks to the Ravens melting down and losing their previous 4 games. What I'm interested in is where we are in the conference. We sit atop the AFC in the number 1 seed, but the Chargers and Patriots are tied with us at 9-4. Last year it was the Raiders and Dolphins, same divisions causing us problems, different teams. We'll see if the final 3-game stretch goes differently. Speaking of the Raiders, I mentioned how they lost a lot of their players due to retirements in the offseason. I went 7-9 with them in my series. They're currently 4-9. If we beat them, then I think I deserve more credit for what I managed to do with them in my series. The game starts off with Seabass kicking a field goal to go up 3-0 in the first. Keep in mind, last season the Raiders shut out the Steelers. That's not going to happen this time as they score their first points against them in this series in the second quarter thanks to a 4-yard run by Zeroaway, then a 6-yard run by Zeroaway to go up 14-3, topped off by a Jeff Reed kick in the final 2 minutes of the half to go up 17-3. Then in the fourth quarter, Marcus Tuiasosopo finds Porter for a 1-yard touchdown to cut the lead down to 7. Can the Raiders find the magic to come back? No, that'll be the final score. It wasn't nearly as close as the score suggests it was, but at the same time, out of the 8 quarters the Steelers had played against them, they only scored in 1 of them. It was enough this time to win. I didn't think I was ever going to say Marcus Tuiasosopo ever again, but I'm glad I did. I missed the kid. Also, Maddox has been terrible. We need him getting into a hot streak soon with the playoffs coming up in 2 weeks. Zero-Way had one of his better performances of the season, but at the same time he had another fumble. It's worrisome to say the least. Jerome Bettis also had one of his better games of the season, but that's also not saying much. I think this deep into the season we can say definitively that Hines Ward is the true number 1 on this team. 8 receptions for over 100 yards, Plexico Burress 4 for 25. I do think that Super Bowl fumble messed up his confidence for this season. The defense did a lot of heavy lifting in this game. Jason Gilden with a performance for the ages. 7 tackles, 1 sack, and 3 forced fumbles. Kendrell Bell with a sack and a forced fumble. Joey Porter with 2 sacks. Casey Hampton with a sack. DYN-CHISE with 2 interceptions. Clark Hagans with a sack and forced fumble. The defense is carrying this team across the finish line. It is now official, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the AFC North champs once again, while the Ravens, who were 6-3 and tied with us at one point, are now 3rd in the division behind the Bengals. The conference is still the same as it was last week, a 3-way tie between the Steelers, Chargers, and Patriots. The number 1 seed can go to any of those 3 teams. Who will claim it? Will it slip through Pittsburgh's fingers in a playoff rematch against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week? On paper, this should be a win, but you never know. They did lose to New York twice. For the first time since week 5 of this season, the Steelers put up more than 30 points in a game. That was the kind of confidence boosting game they needed just a week out from the playoffs. Tommy Maddox also had one of his better performances of the season after seeing how poorly he's been playing for most of the year. Yes, this was a good performance. 249 yards in the air and 3 touchdowns. 2 interceptions, but he did more good than bad. Another fumble this week, this time by the bus, Jerome Bettis. He didn't have a good week, barely managed to get above 2 yards a carry. Zero-Way did look good, 9 for 39 yards. He should have had more touches. Hines Ward continues to show why he's the true number 1 receiver on the team with another 100-yard performance. Plexico Burress and Randall L. both had a touchdown. Zero-Way also saw some action as a catcher, getting a touchdown reception. Antoine Randall L. once again getting a return touchdown. His 4.55 speed, putting in the work. On defense, Joey Porter led the team in tackles with 10, Jason Gilden with 2 sacks, Kendrell Bell with a forced fumble, Larry Foote had a sack, DYN-CHISE with another 2 interception game, Chad Scott with an interception, lastly, Aaron Smith had a sack. We're now going into the final week tied with the Patriots and Chargers for the number 1 spot. Currently, if we win next week, it won't matter, we'll retain the number 1 seed. If the Chargers win but the Patriots lose and the Steelers lose, we gain the number 2 seed since we beat New England earlier this season. The only way we don't get a week off is if we lose but both teams win. Unfortunately, we can't simulate those games as they're either at the same time as us or later, which means we must win this game. But if we lose, we have to hope that either the Patriots or Chargers lose. We'll be facing the Dolphins this week, who already earned their playoff berth, and a win or loss here won't change their positioning. They'll be the number 6 seed. Last season, we needed them to lose in order to gain the number 1 seed. Can they do us a solid this season and help us get the number 1 seed again by benching their starters and losing this week? In a game that had no touchdowns at all, the Pittsburgh Steelers will be going into the playoffs with a number 1 seed again, thanks to the Miami Dolphins losing their final game of the year. Tommy Maddox hasn't had the greatest season, but I'll take being mistake-free over trying too hard to make plays happen. Sometimes the best thing a quarterback can be is a game manager, and he managed this very well. Zero-Way looks to be in top form heading into the playoffs. He had a few good performances, while Jerome Bettis is beginning to show his wear and tear on his wheels. He's still effective, but not as much as he used to be. Something that I have noticed about this season compared to last season is the ball being spread out a lot more. Kevin Dyson and Lee Mays were getting targets. I don't know if that's because of the lack of use in Burress, but we'll see when we get to the season stats. We got to give a shout out to Jeff Reed, made every field goal today. On defense, Jason Gilden led the team with 9 tackles, had a sack and an interception. Aaron Smith had another sack. Casey Hampton had a forced fumble. Deshae Townsend had an interception. That was it. A relatively quiet day for the defense, which is why the offense needed to be mistake-free. And there you have it. The number 1 seed is officially the Pittsburgh Steelers. Had they lost, they still would have had the number 2 seed thanks to New England losing. We're now at the season stats. As you can tell, we'll most likely be looking for a new backup, with Bad Batch being on the final year of his contract and having a terrible season. More importantly, Tommy Maddox has had a subpar season. After having a similar season to his first year as the starting quarterback, he regressed harshly in terms of production, having less touchdown passes, 19, and more interceptions, 20. I think the time to move on from him is this coming season, but you still have to take into consideration who would be better than an 86 overall quarterback and not have a drop off in production. If we do plan to move on from him, I think we have to accept that there will be growing pains. Will it be worth getting someone new who may not have as good of a season like this year, or do we stick with Maddox until we suck the well dry and he retires or regresses beyond being a capable starter? It's a hard position to be in right now. Another position that saw a regression was the running backs. I don't know if their slight regression from last year to this year caused such a major drop off in production, but it would explain why we were struggling to get going as an offense this year. Almost Zero Way saw a slight drop off in his numbers. He did have a half-yard drop in his yards per carry, but did manage to have over 900 yards and 8 touchdowns. In this running backs by committee offense, he still has very solid value, but will need to find a new partner to pair him up with next year, mainly due to the fact that Jerome Bettis is only going to continue to regress. He lost a full yard in his average, got close to 800 and 7 touchdowns. Keep in mind, 4 of those touchdowns came in one game. What I do like is that it shows the difference in what one overall point can achieve in this game, which means if there's a 90 overall player in free agency, you can bet your buns I'm going to make him an offer. Last season, we had 2 1,000-yard receivers. This year, we only had 1. With Tommy Maddox throwing for more yards this year than he did last year, that means he spread it out more, and it shows. Hines Ward was 2 yards short of beating his career high in receiving yards. There were a few games this season that he took over, but it was clear halfway through the year that he was the number 1 receiver. This is now the 4th consecutive season that he had 1,000 yards receiving, and it'll be his 2nd straight Pro Bowl in this series. Despite how good this season was, he was only 4th in the AFC for best wide receiver. I think the lack of touchdowns is what lowered his stock, but a tremendous season nonetheless. Plexico Burress, on the other hand, he didn't have a tremendous season. After having 1,100 yards the year before, he only was able to manage over 750 yards this season, with a lower average of 10.1 per catch compared to his 14 the prior year. It looks like the fumble in the Super Bowl has shaken his confidence this season. Don't be surprised if I consider moving on from him next year in a trade for a running back. The reason I'm getting comfortable moving on from him is the progression of Antoine Randall L. He had his best season so far, but when you have Hines Ward and Burress in front of you, you're going to have to fight for reps, and that's what he did this year. He had a little over half the production of Burress. The writing might be on the wall for him. It also doesn't hurt that he was a solid punt returner for the team this season. That's how he earned his Pro Bowl vote this year. I never claimed that Randall Wynn was going to be the savior of the team. They didn't need saving to begin with, but that we desperately needed a tight end this season. Compared to the 1 catch for 6 yards from Bruner last season, 26 for 185, it's like Dan Marino throwing for 6,000 yards in the modern NFL. We were allowed to throw to the tight end more than once. Jokes aside, good season, I think. Heck of a lot better than the year before. The last receiver I wanted to spotlight was Kevin Dyson. I brought him onto the team to be the 4th receiver with the hopes of not having to use him too much. Turns out he's still pretty good. It's nice to have an extra option, but do I trust him enough to be number 3 going into next season if I have to move on from Plexico? Keep in mind the Plexico trade talks might be too early. We'll have to wait and see. Once again, Alan Faneca led the team in sacks allowed. Is it time to move on from him this coming season? I don't understand why the best player on the offensive line is the worst player in terms of production. He did miss a game due to an injury, but that shouldn't have dropped his pancakes by that much. 21 sacks allowed in the past 2 seasons. I think his time on this team might be coming to an end soon. Can we talk about Jeff Harding's career resurgence? His career wasn't bad before, but he's gotten better on the wrong side of 30. He also made the Pro Bowl after having a similar season to last year but didn't make it. I'm not worried about the center position. The blindside blocker, Marvelous Mr. Smith, had a down season in comparison to his first year, allowed 7 sacks, but he was still solid in the ground game. A surprise, Todd Fordham seems to have found a career here in Pittsburgh. I don't see a need to replace him anymore, even if he is over 30. A similar season to the year before, but the difference is he earned a Pro Bowl vote this year. I'm really surprised how well he's been playing, especially when you compare him to the best player on the line, Alan Faneca, the final player and 3rd Pro Bowler, Kendall Simmons. He is injured, but he will be healthy to go by the time the Divisional Round comes along. Last year, I claimed that the interior guards must be giving up a lot of sacks, trying to convince myself that Faneca's production was caused by how the game was programmed. But with Simmons only allowing 2 sacks, well, I can't defend how poor Faneca's play was this season. We will look into a new left guard, not to mention that Faneca was the 5th best lineman for the AFC. Harding's being the 1st and Simmons 2nd. There has to be good trade value out of them, right? Moving over to the defensive stats, there was only one person with over 100 tackles this year. Kendrell Bell was that defender. He didn't have as good of a season compared to last year. I even pointed out that it seems like he was a tackling machine, but the big plays that he made in the first year didn't show up in the second. That doesn't mean he didn't have a productive season, 3 sacks and 2 interceptions with 3 forced fumbles. He was still a big impact, just not as big. I thought Joey Porter's season last year was really good. This year was even better. He led the team with 12 sacks, he had double the interceptions with 4, was only 3 tackles shy of 100 on the season, had 3 forced fumbles. He earned that Pro Bowl nod. He was even in the top 5 for the AFC MVP. That's how good of a season he had. I re-signed Rodney Bailey in the offseason thinking he was just going to be a stopgap player until we can find someone to replace him and we'll move on. I think that plan has been thrown out the window this season. 8 sacks on the year. I think he's going to continue to be the starter next year. Aaron Smith also had 8 sacks on the season after having a lackluster year from our defensive ends. This year they both showed up big. I did re-sign Aaron Smith. It looks like it was a smart move considering that the defense kept us in so many games this year. After missing half the season last year, Jason Gilden came back with vengeance, 8 sacks, 5 interceptions, 5 forced fumbles, 15 pass deflections, and was 9 tackles shy of 100 on the season. He may be over 30, but he's playing like he's forever young, earning himself a Pro Bowl appearance. Big Snack didn't have as good of a season as last year, but you have to consider that it may be because Smith and Bailey were actually getting to the quarterbacks. He still had 4 sacks and was a force in the middle of the defensive line. Without him, I don't think the defensive ends do as good. Someone who had a sneaky good season, Clark Hagans. He spent most of the time as a relief player for Gilden, but when he did come in, he did make the most of it. 4 sacks with an interception. That alone was better than last year when he started the back half of the season while Gilden was out. Troy Polamalu got injured early on in the year, but even missing half the season, he was just as productive. Imagine if he played the whole year. It makes his numbers even more jarring, realizing that his backups Mike Logan had 13 tackles and an interception, who was also the backup to the rookie Julian Kelly, who only had 14 tackles. The backups to Polamalu showed why they are backups. Larry Foote also had some playing time this year due to an injury to James Ferrier. 18 tackles, 2 sacks. It wasn't very impressive. On the flip side of it, Ferrier only had 35 tackles. We'll need to look for a lot more productive options for the second interior linebacker spot. Dwayne the Ballhawk Washington earned his 2nd straight Pro Bowl this year, thanks to his 10 interceptions on the season. Yes, 10 interceptions. The record for most interceptions in a season is 14 by Night Train Lane in 1952 in 12 games. Washington was also the best AFC defensive back this year. That's not it. Along with Porter and Gilden, we had 3 Steelers who were considered Defensive Player of the Year. This defense got us to 12-4, not the offense. It looks like Deshae Townsend is about as good as a nickel corner can be on the team. I'm happy with the production, but he's not going to be able to take over any of the boundary positions, not anytime soon. Chad Scott is also a productive player on par with Townsend. I also don't think he's that good of a player on the boundary, but at the same time, we don't have anyone better to replace him. I do think the two of them can be interchangeable, which is important if an injury happens. If Washington goes down, well, we're screwed. Surprise, surprise. Jeff Reed had a really good season. He missed 7 kicks, but he also attempted 10 more than last season. It looks like he'll most likely get a ratings boost going into next season. I'm not happy that I'm going to have to pay him a lot of money. A good indicator of how the offense performed is how much the punter had to come out. He came out 11 more times than the previous year. Even with all the turnovers on offense, he still came out more. That tells me the offense, well, it's just not very good. Yet surprisingly, we were top 10 in every important stat. 8th in passing yards, 9th in rushing yards, 8th in total offense. The team was moving the ball, even finishing 4th in points scored. Something that does catch my eye is 16th in passing touchdowns. We were also the best team in sacks allowed. Shocking considering that 1/3 of that is Faneca alone. Now, we were 2nd in the red zone, but only half the time we scored a touchdown, which shows that we just couldn't get in the end zone from the red zone. Defense was much more dominant this year, 5th in total defense, 7th in passing yards allowed, 2nd in rushing yards allowed, and once again 4th in points allowed. We also had 52 sacks, which makes me giggle that it's still middle of the pack. I thought it was impressive at first. We also tied for first with 31 interceptions. 1/3 of that was Washington alone. This defense is, well, legit. But once again, none of these stats matter. Just like Cowher knows, just like I know, just like you know, if you saw last season, everything gets thrown out the window when you start the postseason. Cowher is 0-2 in the Super Bowl. Who knows if he'll ever get there again, but you can't go into the playoffs expecting it to be handed to you because of how well the regular season went. We're 0-0. Let's get Cowher his first ring. Oh, also, he was the 3rd best coach in the AFC. I think Cowher should have earned it, but I get it. Patriots didn't make the playoffs last season. Chargers didn't win the division last year, and they both had an improvement over the Steelers. Like, I get it, but I want it. Looks like Miami didn't get the number 6 seed after all. I was wrong. It was Buffalo. Miami ended up with the number 5 seed, which means the Patriots will face the Bills. If Buffalo wins, then we will face them next week. If they lose, we will face the winner of the other wild card game. New England survived against the Bills thanks to an overtime touchdown by Rohan Davey to Troy Brown. Tom Brady was injured in the game, and the backup Davey had to finish it and won. Is this how Brady gets replaced in New England? Like how he replaced Bledsoe? Probably not, since the same thing happened in 2001 when Brady was replaced by Bledsoe in the AFC Championship Game against Pittsburgh and won. Guess who started the Super Bowl? And the next year. Yeah, that means the winner of the Dolphins and Colts game will be the opponent for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last season, the Dolphins went 1-done in the playoffs, losing to the Raiders in the Divisional Round. The last time the Dolphins and Raiders faced off in the playoffs was also in the Divisional Round, where Miami lost 27-0. It was the same year where they last won their playoff game, which was in the Wildcard matchup against the Indianapolis Colts in 2000. Can Miami beat the Colts again to earn their first playoff win in 5 years? No, it was a close matchup that came down to 3 points, but once again, just like last year, Jay Fielder threw 3 interceptions and no touchdowns. Another 1-and-done season thanks to the poor play at quarterback. That means the Indianapolis Colts will be taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Divisional Round. The Colts have never beaten the Steelers in the playoffs, and I'd be hard-pressed to call this a rivalry. Pittsburgh, up to this point in 2005, have won 9 straight games against the Colts. and are 18-4 against them all time, 4-0 against them in the playoffs, including beating them in the 1995 AFC Championship Game that sent Cowher to his first Super Bowl. Their last playoff matchup was in 1996, where the Steelers blew them away in the Wildcard game. The next time they would meet, well, we all know how that game ended. How will this one? Oh, and before we head to the game, I did increase the prices of everything, but this time I decided not to increase them all the way, only slightly. We'll see if the payout is much better than last year. The Wildcard weekend was exactly that. Wild. There was a pair of AFC East matchups. The Patriots lost Tom Brady, but don't mess with the Rohan, as Davey led the Patriots over the only team that circles the wagons, the 6th seed Buffalo Bills. The second matchup was the Dolphins and Colts. The winner of that game is here today. Indianapolis is visiting Heinz Field as they take on the Steelers without Hardball for the first time, but with the Sheriff, Peyton Manning. There he is under center, making adjustments at the line. The Steelers look to be bringing pressure. This is the first play of the game. It's a throw, and it's picked off by Dwayne the Ball Hawk Washington. The Steelers will be in good field position. What do? Maddox finds Dyson, gets a first down. It's now 3rd down, same drive in the shotgun. The Colts bring pressure out quickly to Randall L to get inside the red zone. It's another 3rd down, haven't moved it at the 14. The drive started with Dyson, they started slicing, and now it ends with Dyson. Steelers with the early 7-0 lead. The Colts' first drive ended on the first play. Second drive and it's 3rd down. Manning throws and it's picked off again, this time by Deshae Townsend. This one to the house. That will be a pick 6, and that's 2 turnovers that ended with 2 touchdowns. Pittsburgh now leads 14-0. We now skip to later in the first. Score is still the same. Steelers ball at the 36. Maddox in the pocket with time, going deep, going real deep, and Hines Ward comes down with it in one-on-one coverage. Same drive, 3rd down inside the red zone. Colts bring a corner blitz, but Maddox gets the ball out to Randall Wynn just a few seconds ago, down to the 2-yard line. It's now 2nd and goal at the start of the second. They hand it off to Zeraway, who finds his way in for another playoff touchdown. They are now up 21-0. Who saw this coming? If there's one thing I've learned about Peyton Manning, is that you never count out the Sheriff. Pump fakes, throws to the flat, edge has space, breaks the tackle, and gets the first. The following play, Manning drops back and finds Reggie Wayne to get another first. It's now 3rd down, same drive, in the shotgun, takes the snap, throws quickly, Wayne again breaks the tackle down at the 25. This is why you never count out the Sheriff, because the Sheriff knows how to edge. Well, he knows how to find edge for the first. They're now inside the 10, 3rd and 4 with just over 2 minutes in the half. Manning takes the snap but is knocked down by Washington. That means Vanderjagt has to come in to put the first points in the game for them, cutting the lead down to 18. We're now in the second half, score still 21-3. Maddox drops back, pressure coming, and finds Burris, who holds on to it through the tackle. Now get them across midfield. Maddox on the logo, throws, going deep, and finds Hines again in a single coverage. It's now 3rd and 5, same drive, just inside the red zone, to the end zone, and knocked away. They'll bring out Jeff Reed. He's only missed 7 kicks all year. This is not one of them. He makes it a 3-touchdown game again. Guess what? Pittsburgh has it again. Maddox drops back, has time, underneath to Randall L near the first, breaks the tackle. Look at that 4.55 speed. The ball is near midfield. The quarter is almost over. Play action throws. He has Randall Wynn right now to get the first. It's now the 4th quarter, 3rd down, still the same drive. They hand it off to Zeraway, talk to the hand, spin move, but can't find his way for the first. That means Jeff Reed has to come out again. He's only missed 7 kicks all year, made one earlier, this one from 44, and it bonks off the goalpost. That would have given them a 24-point lead in the 4th. Is this the start of a comeback? Now, here we go. The Sheriff is out to guide the team. Manning throws, finds Reggie Wayne across the middle, down at the 40. We've seen bigger comebacks in the 4th. There's 3 minutes left in the game, but Domo Origato, his name is Chad Scotto, with an interception. Skip forward to the final 2 minutes, score still the same. The Colts are getting desperate. Manning finds Harrison for the first. A few plays later, after a no huddle, Joey Porter can't get aligned in time. Manning finds finds Troy Walters to get near the first. After the penalty was added instead of the pass, Manning goes back to Harrison for another first. There's now under a minute. Can the Sheriff reach into his bag of tricks? Manning drops back, throws. Harrison has separation from Scott, and he will go all the way for the score, the first touchdown for the Colts. The game's still over, right? Well, not so fast. They still have a chance to recover the onside kick. There it goes. It's bouncing on the ground, and the Colts come up with it. There's no way they can come back. 47 seconds left. No, there's no way. Manning takes the snap and finds Harrison to get across midfield. That took 3 seconds. There's no way they pull this off, right? Manning drops back, has time, steps to his right, down the middle, on a rope to Gaylor, inside the 10. This time Scott makes the tackle. A play later, 2nd and goal at the 5, make it the 10 after this false start. It's now 3rd down at the 11 with 21 seconds left. Manning with the snap in the pocket to Wayne and tackled at the 4. It's now 4th down. Game's over if they don't get a touchdown. A miracle can happen if they score. Manning, Cook, caught at the goal line, but the refs say he didn't get in. The Steelers will take over at the 1. The game is technically over, but they don't want to give them 2 points to get out of their own end zone. You have to find a way, give it to 0-way. And that will be it. The Steelers dominated the first half. The first 6 minutes of the game, they led 21-0. And up until the final 2 minutes, it was 24-3. They'll now be moving on to the AFC Championship Game for the 2nd straight season. We'll find out who Pittsburgh will be facing between the Chargers and the Patriots. Looks like Tom Brady was also out this week, so don't mess with the Rohan unless you're the Chargers. Then mess with him all you want, because he was also injured. He had over 100 yards in the first quarter alone. Had he played the entire game, the Patriots would likely be in the championship game. Instead, it will be the Chargers moving on. I did want to quickly point out that we had a slight dip in our attendance, but we also had a slight increase in our income. When you don't try to scam your own fans, you get more money. Well, to be fair, we still are scamming them, but less scamming. Anyways, it looks like we'll be heading to our 2nd straight AFC Championship game. This time it'll be a rematch not against Oakland, but against a different AFC West team, the San Diego Chargers. The Steelers have never beaten them in the playoffs. Will that change today? For the first time since 1995, the San Diego Chargers will be facing off against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC Championship game. The Chargers won that game, and it would send them to the Super Bowl, where they would lose to the San Francisco 49ers. Can they return back to the Super Bowl, or will the Steelers overcome their 0-2 streak against them, giving them their 2nd Superbowl appearance in as many years? Let's find out next. We start in the first drive in the game. Pittsburgh's ball, 3rd down, Maddox over the middle and over the receiver, picked off by Tay Cody. From undesirable to undeniable, setting the Chargers up in good field position, coach giving Maddox an earful. The defense does its job and forces the Chargers into a field goal. It's going to be a 53-yard attempt. It looks to have the distance, but it does fall short. No good. We skip to later in the first. Chargers ball, Drew Brees throws to his left, but it's snatched out of the air by Dwayne the Ball Hawk Washington. That's his 2nd interception in the playoffs. They'll set the Steelers just outside the red zone. The following drive, Maddox moves to his right, down the middle to Randall Wynn, right now to get inside the red zone. Tackled at the 8. The drive would bog down, and that would lead to a field goal by Jeff Reed, and the first points in the game. Steelers are up 3-0. First offensive play for the Chargers following the field goal. Domo Arigato, his name is Chad Scotto, intercepts Drew Brees for his 2nd one on the day. That would also end with a field goal attempt. The Steelers offense not being able to get much going, but they'll still be up by 6 thanks to Jeff Reed and the secondary. Nothing much going on in the game. Final minute of the half, still 6-0. Chargers trying to get something going, but Domo Arigato, yes, his name is Chad Scotto, with his 2nd interception in the game, celebrates a little bit too early and tackled at the 1. There's only one way, 0-way, takes the handoff and finds his way in for his first touchdown in the game to make it 13-0 going into the half. Now the half isn't over yet. There's still 14 seconds left. Breeze in the pocket. He goes deep and finds David. Please come to Boston to get them into the field goal range. They missed one from 53. This one is also 53, but in the other direction. Doesn't matter. Still falls falls short, Pittsburgh pitching a shutout. We skip to halfway through the third, still a shutout, Pittsburgh's ball, play action, Maddox over the middle to Hines Ward, who makes a tough catch at midfield. If there's one thing that this offense does well, it's that if they need a way, give it to Zero Way, who gets the first down. They're now inside the 40. Marching, Maddox gets it to Burris in tight coverage for another first. It's now 3rd and 9, same drive, trying to get into the red zone. Over the middle to Randall L, but his 4.55 speed can't get him the first this time. Now lead to the 3rd field goal by Jeff Reed in this game. This one will be from 37 yards out, and they'll still make it a 2-touchdown game, but it's 16-0. We're getting to the end of the 3rd, and the Chargers are still scoreless. Tomlinson continues to keep defenders at bay for the first down. It's now the 4th quarter. Breeze in the pocket to his left. David, please get me out of Boston. Gets them across midfield. Another 3rd down, same drive. Pressure getting there over the middle and wide open. Eric Parker makes the catch. There's still time. They don't need a rush. It's a pitch to the right side. Tomlinson, spin move, and will get them near the first. Just over 3 minutes left in the game. 2 touchdowns, 2 2-point conversions. It's not over yet. Wells with the reception to extend the drive. It's now 3rd and goal. Breeze in the pocket. Plenty of time. Pumps it, and he's sacked by Aaron Smith. Now bring up 4th down. This could be the game-defining play. Breeze takes the snap. Feeling pressure over the middle, and it's knocked down. The game will end with the Steelers completely shutting out the San Diego Chargers 16-0. Once again, they've had a dominant playoff run, but will it carry over to the Super Bowl? It looks like lowering the prices increased our attendance. Unfortunately, income did not, but that's fine. I'm happy knowing the fans are happy. We're now heading to our 2nd Super Bowl in this series. Will we get over the hump against the Saints, or will it be a rematch against the Buccaneers? There ain't gonna be no rematch. There ain't gonna be no rematch. It looks to me that Brad Johnson was injured and Chris Sims, played instead. It was close up until the 4th quarter, then they embarrassed them. Sure enough, the Buccaneers were injured at key positions. I wanted a rematch, but we'll see how good the number 3 offense fares against the number 4 defense. A year ago, the Pittsburgh Steelers were in the Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were 1 play away from winning the game, or at the very minimum tie it, but a turnover ended their hopes of finishing the season with the Lombardi. This year they take on the New Orleans Saints, who had only 1 playoff win prior to 2004, had a run for the ages, and here they are at the end of the year. One of the most winningest franchises in the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the team that was once called the Aints. Who that? Not the Aints, but the Saints. Who comes out as the Super Bowl champions? We start towards the end of the 1st. As expected, both teams can't get anything going, but we don't show special teams for no reason. It's either going to be a touchdown or a turnover. With the Randall L, it really could be either. Spin move. Look at him go. That 4.55 speed doing work, but he gets chased down from behind and he loses the ball. 10 yards short of the end zone. Saints recover it. We skip to the middle of the 2nd quarter, still scoreless. Maddox throws and it's picked off by the rookie Thomas. The 2-minute warning is creeping up in the half. 3rd down, they hand it off to McAllister, finds a gap and runs over Kendrell Bell for a first down. They're now inside the 10. Brooks in the pocket, laser over the middle for a touchdown to Conwell for the first touchdown in the game. There's still 2 minutes left in the half. Pittsburgh can still tie it. 3rd down, Maddox in the pocket over the middle to Dyson to get the first down. The following play, Maddox with time, pumps it, goes deep, right side. Ward makes the catch and fights for extra yards. Now trying to get into better field position, Maddox finds his tight end for another first. There's now only 1 minute left in the half. 3rd down, Maddox quickly gets rid of it to Ward for another first, and he fights his way inside the 10. It's now 3rd and goal. Maddox throws, speed boost. Zero Way finds his way in for a score. The penalty was offsides. The touchdown will stand, and it's all tied at 7 at the half. Let's move over to the 3rd quarter. Score still the same. Saints ball. They hand it off to McAllister, who's been running over men today. Not boys, grown men. The next play, it worked once. Why not do it again? This time he finesses his way in for another first. When the running game works this well, why stop? Well, to set up the play action, of course. When you mess with the Saints, you get the horn. Joe Horn takes it all the way to the house to give New Orleans the lead 14-7. After a 3-and-out from Pittsburgh, Saints ball, you know what the worst thing about defending a mobile quarterback? It's that they're mobile. Brooks gets near the first on the scramble but takes a big hit in the process. Next play, if it ain't broke, why fix it? McAllister takes the ball for the first. The third quarter is winding down. They go back to McAllister and he just makes everyone look silly out there. Same drive in the fourth, near the red zone, McAllister takes the handoff to get inside the 15. They were the number 2 run defense all season. Today they look like the number 32 ranked run defense. McAllister running all over the entire defense on 1st and goal, and it's just a quarterback sneak, power versus power, and they completely overwhelm the Pittsburgh Steelers defense to get a 21-7 lead in the final quarter. It's never over till it's over. Maddox had 4 interceptions last year, but here's his chance to redeem himself. In the pocket, throws, and it's picked off. That's his 3rd in the game. That will lead to a field goal attempt by New Orleans, 37 yards to make it a 3-score game. But it comes up short. So you're telling me there's a chance. The offensive line is being bullied, but finds Burris for a few yards. He had 2 catches for 13, injuring himself here on the play. Things are just going from bad to worse, but it's still salvageable. 3rd and 3, just under 2 minutes. There's still time, and I think time just ran out for Maddox in Pittsburgh. That was his 4th interception in this game, and for the 2nd straight year, Maddox threw 4 in the biggest game of his career. When they needed him most, he choked it away. Well, that happened. Again, I can't believe how terrible Maddox has been this season. It was like he was a different player, except in the Super Bowl, he was the same guy. The difference this game was that the defense wasn't able to force turnovers. The punt return that was fumbled, it seems destined for this team to go the way of the Buffalo, circling the wagons. Thank you all for watching this all the way through. If you didn't, you skipped around. I hope you still enjoyed the bits that you saw. My apologies for such a delayed upload. I haven't had the time to work on these as much as I did the previous video. I hope you still enjoyed it, even if the playoffs felt a bit rushed. I'm trying to get these out quicker, but I also like putting in all the extra details of the franchise mode, and I hope you do too. As always, I'm just grateful people enjoy the videos I upload. I'll never not be surprised that people also play Madden the same way I do. I thought I was just a genetic freak. See you all in Season 3.